Hey everyone, allow me to introduce you to my friend Fred, the Federal Reserve Economic Data, which is hosted by the St. Louis Fed. But this is one of the most comprehensive sources of economic data on the internet. In fact, and it's in some ways too extensive. There's so much here, it can be kind of vexing. But it is a great source. And so, as part of the ongoing data exercise, I want to show you how to use it, introduce you to it. So, if you recall, for my example, I have this proposition that the trade deficit, that the U.S. trade deficit, is driven by investment, right? The desire of international investors to get dollars to invest in either the stock market or T-bills. So, if that's true, then we should see it in the data, right? So how do we go about doing it? Well, first things first. And what I'm going to do in this video is show you how I get the information on the dependent variable. That is the trade deficit. And we're going to look at it, along the way, maybe make a couple substantive points. So first thing we do, we go here and we say, hey, I need information. So let's just go, I need information about U.S. imports. So I'm going to put in U.S. imports. Now I'm going to tell you, you get a lot of stuff, right? Like, yeah, sure, exactly what I wanted maybe came up first, or did it? We have imports of goods and services and billions of dollars, quarterly, seasonally adjusted annual rate. Okay, so what that means is, we're going to get quarterly data, but it's going to be at an annual rate, right? So that it's not going to be just that amount that quarter. It's going to be like, hey, if this is what was going on this quarter, what would the annual rate be? And so you got a lot going in here. By the way, we also have real imports of goods and services, right? Adjusting for inflation, and that's actually the one I want to use. I want to just look in over time at real rates, I think. Why not? It's going to be in 2017 chain dollars. So I'm going to go click on this, and we're going to see the data. And what Fred does, and I've shaped the screen. I brought it in here mainly because these graphs look better when you have the wide screen. Your graphs are really flat, but you get a graph. Yay! Right? And you immediately see, and here's, by the way, substantively, this is the thing, right? Oh my God, here are our imports. Oh, look how much we import. Oh my God, right? And when we look at this, by the way, we have a date range. At the top, we have a date range. This is the max range from 1947 to 2024. We can play around, right? We can change the range. We can see what's happened. Max range is nice here. But we can change that. We could say, hey, I just want to see what it is since 1970, right? And your range will change. Okay, let's go back to 47. All right, so here's our whole range. Now, that's cool. You can download this thing and use it, but hey, let's edit the graph. Because I want the trade deficit, right? So I don't want just imports. I want some other information. And a cool way of going about getting it is to use what I've done, by the way, just to reiterate. Click on Edit Graph. We go in and you can edit the line. We can do stuff to the picture, but we can also add a line. This is basically, we can look up an additional piece of information. So U.S. exports, right? And then we see exports of goods, services, and we want to keep, since this one is real exports, let's keep comparable data. So now I've got real exports, and I can add that in, right? Now, by the way, we can go with the format. We can change things, right? Our line colors, because I already know what this line is going to look like, and I'm going to customize it to be a solid line. And while I'm at it, let's go up here and I'm changing the color. I'm going to change the color of these lines. So great. We got red and green. Okay. What do we got? So if we get back in here, hey, now we have these two lines, right? Now we've got in red our imports, and in green our exports, right? And you'll see that they kind of go up and down together. Imports get away from exports, but one point I like to say is, hey, look, we do have a lot of exports, right? This gap here, even though it's widening, people say we don't, so we're importing too much. It's like, well, we export a lot too. But this is the gap. We now have right here, we now have the gap, right? But I've got the gap here because I'm going to keep the constituents, right? If I want to talk about the trade deficit, I want imports and exports, right? I can subtract them to get the difference, right, in a spreadsheet. So if I have the constituent data, that's perhaps more important. But hey, something on a pedagogic note, while we're here, because you've got all the time in the world to spend watching my videos, something I like to do is I like to scale this graph to gross domestic product, right? So I've just gone back in, said add a line. Let's get gross domestic product in here, and I have picked. I picked a measure that will be the same. Of course, I didn't. Let me add it. There we go. So now I've added it in. Important safety tip. Actually hit the add line button. And let me format this, and this one, line 3, we're going to make it a line, and we'll make it very dark. All right. So here we go. And here, let's go ahead and shorten our timeline to 1980. Okay, so when Reagan was elected. Here is, and this is something I like to do. What I've done, this top line here is GDP, right? And so we see U.S. GDP always growing. And the point of adding this here, and there's kind of a pedagogic point here, we now have a chart that is looking at the whole thing, right? At the top, we have the GDP. At the bottom, we have it. And one thing I always like to do is say, look, in the 80s, back in the day, it's really hard to see the gap, right? And what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, look at, just as we're running along here, here's our gap. And right there, that's the trade gap. And so I like this graph because it visualizes imports and exports, right? Rather than talking about the trade deficit. If we just looked at the trade deficit, well, hey, by the way, I happen to have that loaded up. This is the trade balance, goods and service balance of payments, right? If you look at the balance, right? Oh my God, we're negative. We've been negative. This goes back to 92. And it goes up and down. And interesting, January, wow, it really went. We'll have to see if that data, they refine data later on. So the latest data is wonky, but wow. The thing is, if you look at this, the patient's dying, right? And oh my God, it's $40,000 million, right? That's 40 billion. These are, this is measured in millions of dollars for some unknown reason. So we have $40,000 million. Well, that's that line right here. It's what, 96, 978,000 millions. Crazy. Point though is, it looks bad there. When you look at it here, wait, you get a little thing I like to call perspective. Okay, so is that really all our problems are from that little gap right there? Is that what you're telling me? But that little gap is the dependent variable that I need to look at. So here's some data, right? And so what do I do? One of the cool things is now that I've got this graph, I not only can get the graph, I can get the data. You hit download, and you will be able to download in generic data form or an Excel file. And you'll be able to just go ahead and save that puppy and use it later. So this is how I'm going to get the data. I'm going to download an Excel spreadsheet. So that's the first step. Obviously, I'm going to need other variables at other times. But the point is, here's Fred. Here's how you use it. Very powerful tool. Here, pedagogically, hey, or just substantively, looking at it, here's a little graph of the trade deficit. And I always like to say, unless you put it in, when it was only when we added in GDP, we got some true perspective. Now, that's just take that point with you. So in the next video I'm going to do on this, I will open up that data file and show you how to use it and how to get things. I'm also going to probably not do a video on it, but I'm going to get interest rate data and investment data in the same way to have a measure of an independent variable. So, oh, such excitement.